Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thanks for joining me again. This week we're going to tackle some fingerstyle Delta blues. This is intended to be played solo, so completely unaccompanied. And one of the most important elements of playing unaccompanied blues is to be able to very clearly outline the changes of a 12-bar blues. In this case, in the key of E. So of course this requires that you know your 12-bar blues structure very well. And as we learn this piece, I'll be pointing out some of our crucial landmarks to help you find your way. So the study that I've put together has us going around the 12-bar blues form twice. The first time is slightly more sparse and simple, but the second time we throw in some extra changes and things get a little more involved. Now this piece in particular is going to be much easier if you have my lesson materials to follow along with. I've put a lot of care and attention into typing these things out in tab and notation, and you'll see how having this out in front of you on a sheet really benefits this fingerstyle way of playing. So there'll be two links in the description for you to get hold of those materials. One takes you to my Patreon, where for a small monthly fee you get access to all of my lesson materials, and the other link will take you to my Gumroad store, where you can purchase this one piece in particular. Either way, I really do appreciate your support, so thank you. So you'll see on the sheet music I've written out for this that I've separated the bass notes from the melody notes, which I think is really important when you approach a fingerstyle piece like this. Even if you don't read notation, you can be looking at the tab underneath, but do scan above and see which notes are the bass notes and which notes are the treble notes. All of the bass notes, which will be played by the thumb, are going to have all of the stems going downwards. And all of your other notes, what we can call the melody notes, played by fingers 1, 2 and 3, will be written with the stems going upwards. And we'll kick things off with 4 bars of E, or E7, as it's typically treated in the blues. And for the most part, throughout this entire piece in fact, the thumb will just be playing the quarter note pulse. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and it'll typically be the root note of whatever chord we're on. So in this case that's the open low E string. 1, 2, 3, 4. So keep that in mind, that's going to be our general rule of thumb, no pun intended. Also, if you can get used to counting rhythms out as you play, that makes learning these sorts of pieces so much quicker and easier. So we know that for the first bar, the thumb is simply going to be playing the low E string open. Now for the melody along with that, we're going to play 1, 2, 3, 4. So this sort of lick is very typical in the blues. We're thinking E7. This would be a portion of your E7 voicing with a D shape. And then E minor pentatonic, getting that nice ringing open E string with everything. And then coming down the pentatonic, but then going major. Instead of going to the minor pentatonic there, we're pulling off to the major third of the E chord. So really we're mixing two things. We're blending E7 chord voicings with notes from an E minor pentatonic scale. These little reverse slides with fast pull-offs are a really big part of that blues phrasing as well. Make sure you swing it very heavily. Now in bar number 2, we could have just kept the thumb playing this open string for the root, but we're going to chuck in a little bit of bass movement just to keep things a bit more interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the open E and then a pull off from 3 to 0 back to the open E. The melody, second fret of the D string, comes in on the and of 1. 1, 2, and. The and of 2 as well there. Or you can be thinking of breaking beat 2 down into a triplet. 2 and 1 and 2 and 3. Then on beat 4, we're grabbing this portion of an A major chord. We're kind of implying the 4 chord here. The second fret of the G and the second fret of the B. You can bar them both with the second finger. And then both strings open with a quick hammer onto that major third of E. On the and of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and. Now the third bar is identical to the first bar. And again, as we've said many times, this is such an important element of the blues, creating a little bit of a patter. And simply just repeating a riff is one very easy way to create a little bit of a conversational structure to things. So now we have 3 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Now in bar number 4, the thumb is going to play the low E string 3 times, and then the same note 1 octave higher at the second fret of the D string. In terms of the left hand, you want to be thinking again of this little portion of an E major chord. Top 4 strings, 2, 1, 0, 0. And we're walking through the 6th to get to our flat 7. And then the open E on top. Now in bar number 5, we're heading to the A7 chord. So we switch our bass note to the open A string, because of course that is now our root note. And we're just simply going to see out 2 bars worth of that. The melody on top goes like this. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Bring the thumb in on all of those beats. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. In bar number 6, we're going back to E7, and the thumb has the easy job of just playing that root note 4 times again on the open low E string. And for the phrase that goes on top of that, again we're going to fuse together those 2 elements, the E minor pentatonic and the E major triad. If we focus on the minor pentatonic first, let me show you something that I think is really beneficial to work on. Plot out your E minor pentatonic along the B string. So if you were starting on your root, that would be the 5th fret, then up to the 8th fret, 10th fret, 12th fret, 15th, or 3rd fret. We could use the open B string as well, of course. Now you can hit the open E on top of that. Bring in the bass note. Play around with that all day. I recommend putting in a lot of practice doing that. Helps to train that independence with the thumb and the fingers as well. So with that in mind, here's the minor pentatonic portion of that phrase. And then we're going back to that E major sound, sliding down the minor pentatonic, but then going to the major third with a pull off, and then the root. That next part of the phrase is simply thinking E6 and the root note on top. And then we play a passing note here, a C7 with the G in the bass. And then that's going to drop down to the B7, our 5 chord, but with the F sharp in the bass. These are typical bluesy voicings that tend to sound a little thicker and darker, as opposed to the root in the bass. The 5th in the bass definitely fattens things up a little bit. Now on the B7, the thumb's just going to stay true to that bass note for 4 beats while we play this on top. Really just exploring what we can grab in and around a B7 chord shape. Notes from the E minor pentatonic, or notes from the B7 or B9 chord. You've got all sorts of options. Fifth in the bass. And now we're going to use one of my favorite tricks. So instead of just staying on that B7 for another bar, we're going to bring in the F sharp 7, which is the 5 of B7. And B7 is 5, right? Because we're in the key of E. So we refer to the F sharp 7 as the 5 of 5. B7 is the 5, E is the 1. So that's what you call a secondary dominant, which if you've seen my other videos, that'll seem extremely familiar by now. Thumb hooks over to play the root note on the 2nd fret of the low E string. First finger on the 2nd fret of the D string, third finger on the 3rd fret of the G string. There's our F sharp 7, 3-note voicing. Again, that'll look very familiar if you've seen any of my swing lessons. With the F sharp 7, we've got the luxury of including a couple of open strings to add some colour to that. That's the flat 7 on top, and the B note is like an 11 or a sus4 kind of sound. And then B7, we're going to go to this 3-note voicing for that. Root, 3rd, flat 7. And then E7, hammer onto the major 3rd, 2nd finger staying where it was. Now we're about to hit bars 11 and 12, so we need a turnaround, of course. We're going to play this one, a very simple one. Take that E7, move it up a minor 3rd, drop it down a semitone, down a semitone again. One more time, you're back where you started. Picking wise, we're playing. Bringing in that open E on top now and then. Now to finish the turnaround, we need to make our way to our 5 chord, B7. So we do a little bass run. G sharp, A sharp, B, chromatic from the 4th fret. Then again, just like before, thinking of this B7 and grabbing what we can with that spare little finger. The sharpened 5th in this case. So here's bars 10, 11 and 12. 3, 4. That resolves to E for beat 1 of bar 1 of our 2nd time round the 12-bar structure. Now again, the thumb has the easy job of simply hitting that root note for 4 beats, while we're going to explore the E blues scale on the top strings, getting that nice doubling of the E note, 5th fret of the B string, open E string. Come down the scale and then do a trill to the blues note and back before pulling off to the open string, and then grab that root note at the 2nd fret of the D string. Now unlike before where we started with just 4 bars of E, this time we're throwing in a very typical 1930s sounding trick, which is to go 1 bar of E and then do the next bar as a split bar of the 4 and the 5, so the A7 to the B7 in this case, before returning back to E for 2 bars. A7, we're going to form this chord voicing here, very typical. We're going to bar the 2nd fret from the D string down and add the flat 7 here on the 3rd fret of the top E string with the 3rd finger. Open A string, of course, is now your bass note, and we're going to play this. So for the first time now, we're bringing in some alternating bass with the thumb. You're going to go from the open A to the 2nd fret of the D. That's really the next rung up on the ladder of what to do with your bass notes. Once you've gotten comfortable just playing the root notes of the chords, start bringing in alternating bass that goes from the root to the 5th of the chord. So for the A chord, that's your A to your E and back. For the E chord, that would be E to B and back. And for the melody here, we want to really pull up at the strings, kind of as we've done all the way through, to be fair. You don't want to play this too polite, be quite aggressive in the right hand. Again, like before, on the B7, we're simply exploring with the little finger to see what we can find. The 9th, pulling off to the root. Then the open E, which is the root of the next chord, that kind of acts as your resolving note. Now for our next 2 bars of E, we're going to play a long line that sets up the A7 chord in bar number 5, and we're using mostly triplets timing wise here. We're going to play 1 and 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1. Take away the bass note and isolate the melody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I would also recommend practicing it that way. Get the phrase down without the bass notes, and then all you've got to do, once you're comfortable with it and it's in the muscle memory, start bringing that bass note back in. For the A7, of course, the bass note moves to the open A string. We hammer on from the minor to the major third. And we're playing this partial A7 shape here. We're barring from the D string down at the 5th fret, and then we're bringing in the major third there, 2nd finger 6th fret of the G string. And we're exploring that same line we did on the E earlier. You know, the 5th, the 6th and the flat 7, and then the root on top. Now we could just stay on that A chord again for another bar, but we're going to do another favourite trick of mine, which is to get back to the 1 chord from the 4, you can go 4 to 4 minor. Very pretty sound. And to do that, I'm simply thinking of this A minor triad here, from the D string down, frets 7, 5, 5, and similar melody to before, bringing that 6th along the way. The bass note is alternating in both of these bars, by the way, from the A string to the D string. And then we're going to play a very fancy little voicing here. B7 with a sharpened 5th. Root, flat 7, 3rd, sharpened 5th. Helps us to continue that line. But we're harmonizing that rather than the flat 7 of A, we're thinking of it now as the sharp 5 of B, which is our 5 chord. 4 minor to the 5. Return back to a normal B7 by changing the shape to this. That open E string on either side gives us a really easy way to resolve back to the 1. Notice how in those bars we also kept that alternating bass going between the A and D strings. Now we're back on our 1, another trick that I use a lot that you'll recognise from previous videos, I'm sure. Thinking of E major triads on string set 2, and thinking about turning those into double stops of 3rds or 6ths. Add some chromaticism, and you've got a bluesy sounding phrase. Now C7, just like we did earlier on, that passing chord, a semitone above the 5. We're using that voicing with the thumb over again. And then we're just keeping that thumb on to keep that B note going in the bass and exploring B minor pentatonic and B7 arpeggios, those kinds of things. All we do here is this. And again, that's a very beneficial thing to practice, holding a bass note down with a thumb while the fingers explore a scale or an arpeggio. Helps to train the independence between your digits. Now in bar number 10, we go to our 4 chord, A7. again, we're mixing a couple of elements there. Notes from an A7 arpeggio, bringing in the ninth as well. Common little bit of chromaticism there. All you've got to visualize to remember that trick is that we're on the 4 chord. There's your major triad, A major. Chromaticism here, flat 7. And then again, we can use the open E string to our benefit. We can be thinking E minor pentatonic now. The beauty of those open strings is it gives you a chance to travel with the hand and move positions. You just got to be very good at letting things ring. Don't let things block out as you move the hand. Be very delicate. Don't be clumsy with it. And then resolving to the E major again. And again, that's the same shape as before. Hammering on from the minor to the major third and making the most of the ability to use our 2 open E strings. So I'll pick that up from bar 7, and remember this is our second go round the 12 bar form. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And for our second turnaround we do something a little fancier than last time. We're going to go from the 1 to the 6 dominant C sharp 7, which really we could say that's the 5 of the F sharp 7 that comes up next, and that's the 5 of the B7 that comes up next. So you've got a line of secondary dominance. So technically you could call this the 5 of 5 of 5. Here's the 5 of 5, and here's the 5. And then there's the 1, of course, on the end. Sometimes though, of course, it's quicker just to think 1 to the 6 dominant. Just have that as a little caveat in your mind. It's dominant, not minor, as you typically would expect on the 6. Thumb comes over to bring in a passing note at G before landing the F sharp 7's root note. For the F sharp 7, we bring in a very common extension. This always sounds very ragtimey to me. You've got your F sharp 7 voicing here, and then you've got your flat 9 on top. Thumb, again, has to hook over for these bass notes. And then B7, just like before, bringing in some stuff with the little finger, the 9 pulling off to the open B string. Resolving to the E, again, effortlessly by using these open E strings. Brilliant, isn't it? Just before we carry on, I'm going to isolate the thumb movement in the right hand for that section, because there's a little bit more going on. You've got the bass note of the E, walking up chromatically to the C sharp, passing note here a tritone away, bass note of the F sharp, alternating bass at the flat 7 of the F sharp, and then the root note of the B chord twice. Now as a little ending, we basically just play another turnaround on the back of that. So this is E7 with the 5th in the bass. This is like a A sharp diminished 7 or an E diminished 7. It's good to think of it as a 1 diminished. This is A minor 6, so the 4 minor. And then this again is your E major, there's your triad. Check out my videos on spread triads and swing voicings from triads if you want to know more about those things. Trying to keep that top E string ringing all the way through that, by the way, from the previous bar. And then a typical little line at the end. But we're going to harmonise it and chuck something fancy on the end. This is an E9, this kind of a chord. You've got E7 as your starting point. Simply take the root note up a whole tone to bring in the 9 in the bass, and then the low open E down low. Now obviously there's a ton of stuff to talk about technique-wise here, but we'll be fairly quick and minimal about this. Right hand, the picking has to be strong. Don't be shy, really pluck at the strings, get right under them with the fingers and really ping them. And the thumb sometimes should have some kind of element of a slap to it in places. Try lots of different things to get different tones and textures out of the thumb. Keep everything sounding really bouncy and dynamic. Also, notice how all the way through the bass notes are palm muted, but of course the top notes aren't. That takes a bit of practice. Left hand wise, I guess the main talking point is again the thumb gets a lot of action. Hooking over, playing those bass notes on your chords. Also, don't be afraid to bend some of the notes, play it with a sense of elasticity. Man, that's a hard word to say. Yeah, really wrangle those notes into submission. Kind of like our swampy blues study from a few weeks back. Make things sound a little ugly now and then. We're not going for perfection here or neatness, we're going for grit and intensity. Now, as always, of utmost importance here and at the forefront of our mind should be feel and a sense of time. So this means practicing with a metronome. There's no other way to do it. Don't skimp on this. There are areas where you can get away with that to some extent, but this is certainly not one of them. So I'm going to set my metronome to a slightly slower speed than full speed for this piece, let's say 65 BPM, and my main focus is going to be staying locked into the pocket. I would recommend tapping your foot on every beat as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, now let's have a little bit of tone talk because I did something slightly differently on this one. I'm using one of my favourite guitars, my 1953 Gibson ES125. This is all original. The pickup, the original P90 there, sounds amazing. Really big, bold sounding, quite high output, surprisingly. And I'm running this into my 1957 Fender Tweed Champ. That amp is battered and bruised and even suffered some water damage at some point in its life. And it has the original 6-inch speaker in there. And I managed to pick it up very cheaply because of that. And all it took was a little bit of TLC, and now it's back to its singing best again. And I mic'd it up with one of my favourite recording mics for electric guitar, made by a guy in Australia called Open Plan Recording. He calls it the Grill. It's essentially a Royer 121 copy, but with a few little tweaks in there. So that's on one channel. Now I've also blended in a little bit of a close mic to pick up some of the acoustic properties of this guitar, as well as some of that nice finger noise to make it sound really organic and in the room. And for that I use a Neumann KM184, positioned fairly close, pointed at about the 15th fret, where the neck and the body join. And I've blended that in just a little bit. And that's always been my MO when it comes to recording archtops, whether it's this one or the 175. I think blending those two signals together is where it's at. Now inevitably people will ask about nail length in the right hand. I have short nails, I don't like growing them out at all. So for me I'm mostly hitting the strings on the fleshy tips of my fingers. And that will cause blisters for a while until you get some calluses built up. But I do prefer that, it's more versatile for me. These strings are Thomastik flat wound 12 gauge. I'm going to be changing back to round wound on this guitar soon because I feel like these flat wounds are lovely strings, but they mute the top end a little too much for my liking on this guitar. But I think they'll be perfect for the 175. So just before signing off for the day, let me give you some recommended listening. Go way back to the early days of the Delta blues and listen to players like Lonnie Johnson, Charlie Patton, Blind Blake, Skip James, Robert Johnson, and Lightning Hopkins. Again, it's all about getting that sound in your ears and really immersing yourself in it so you understand the feel of this music. Okay, so as always, thanks for watching guys, and please do like and subscribe, it makes a hell of a difference. And do check out my Patreon if you get a chance too. See you guys next week, take care.